When the time came to move, we were not in the market, and we lost footing. And we got to a point now where LNG prices went south. But certainly now there's moves going on now to see if we can now develop the next train of the LNG project. Would have been nice if we had gotten the brass LNG going, or we had gotten the OK LNG, because it would be good to just have, you know, a mix of LNG projects. I keep telling people that, you know, we have 4 major industrial parks located on the coast of the country. We have OK, we have Lekki, Ogidigben, Brass, but none of these parks are working. Each and probably all of these parks could have been a location for an LNG project, given the size of our abundance, 198 TCF of gas. We're probably much, much, much more. So we could actually play the export game, right, our domestic game conveniently. When you strip the carpet, right, and look underneath, you'll understand that, you know, we have been caught up in many different games. There's been game theory amongst our partners, the IOCs. There have been big man, Nigerian big man issues around some of our upstream gas developments. There have been policy issues, our failure also to have legislation around gas over the last few years has affected these opportunities. But at least we're literally set to go, right, for the development of the next LNG train. So hopefully that's a start. But, and this is the problem, we now have competition. Competition first from America, which was our market. At some point, we lost our market. America is now becoming an exporter. So that market is gone. So now we now try to fight for the European market, and then also try to see how much we can get into the Asian market. But we're competing against very strong players like Australia, like Qatar. The Mozambicans are steering, so are other players. And also at the same time where so many other countries are also now discovering gas resources. And this is the power of technology. Technology allowing the geophysicists to see resources more clear when they go about exploring. So this calls for urgent action as a nation. We've been too slow in getting things done. That's the bottom line. As I told my friend earlier on that, I'm going to speak not as someone in government, I'm speaking now as in my own individual capacity. You know, I feel pained that, you know, we're sitting on so much opportunity, so much resources, which we're not optimizing properly because of the system that we decided to run as a country. You know, but yes, we must get cracking. That's really the long and short of my response to you. And we're ready to go.
Thank you very much. That's a very good response. But I do know that T7 it's halfway through, or they're planning to take an FID. If an FID is taken, I think that's a very good thing, as well as for the development of gas. Some financing is being searched for. And so if all that is in place and we get all the white flags, as it were, that will take off. And that will be nice. You're never too late in a project. I think that's one thing we've learned. The LNG project itself took 30 years. The first LNG, to educate ourselves, was 1969. The first cargo was exported in 1999, 30 years. We've been talking about another LNG train since year 2018 years, so we still have time. But you really don't have time in the sense that Mozambique, Tanzania, okay, they are closer to the real markets of the Far East than you are. Australia has several LNG, at least 10 LNG trains coming up upstream, and about half of them already on stream. So there's a lot really happening. And more annoying is there's a field, a large field. It was 3 or 4 years ago declared the 3rd largest reserve in the world. It's called the Zoha field in the Mediterranean, offshore Egypt. Can you believe it has started production? 3-4 years ago, they discovered it started production. And we are still making noise in Nigeria. For how long do we continue this noise making? So I think there's a lot of in such a, so carry that message to the powers that be, that we should get back to the race and run our race faster. Now, next question goes to our friends who are in the LPG business. How much progress can Nigeria expect in the butynization process? Butynization means putting more butane. Your LPG cylinders is actually butane that is in there. And LPG market has been driven largely by Nigeria LNG because of the state of our refineries. You have to produce enough at a higher capacity to have enough gas. So we didn't have that. So rather than import, I think LNG has bailed us out. However, that's definitely going to be a game changer post-2019, not post-Mayo, but post-2019 because of Dangote. Dangote refinery will be one of the biggest refineries in the world at 650,000 barrels a day. And of course, it has attached to it a fertilizer plant as well as petrochemical plant. And so it simply means that there will be awash with LPG. So those of you in the business, what are you going to do? Nkechi, you're nearest to me, so fire on.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me thank those who invited us here today for this seminar anyway. Well, let me, the butynization and things like that, the LNG has been the supplier of the current domestic market today, and they've done so well. And this is the level that the domestic market started was about 150 metric tons per 150,000 metric tons, and today I think we are doing almost 450, which is very commendable, and the market is still growing. And the current government, I think, is equally doing something very, very good in terms of trying to put the policy in place to grow the domestic market. I didn't say that in the other government that were in place, even though that those things has not materialized, but you could see some light in the tunnel that there is some, because there has been so much concentration on the natural gas, industrial gas, but at this time, this is the first time I'm seeing a government that is a little bit very passionate about the domestic market and to grow it, and that's why they have, I think, the enhancement committee, and the Minister of State too has equally been involved in trying to put a policy in place in this one. So I think that's very, very good. But then when you come back to Nigeria on the consumption per capita, we are still very, very low compared to Ghana, compared to Cameroon, compared to everywhere. When we go out outside the country to discuss about adoption of gas, Nigeria is still quite low. It's as if we are not serious. Last week we were in Ghana, August, Ghana, we were there, and the whole of the West African country were there. It's all about talk, and nothing much is coming there, you know. So I'm hoping that our level of consumption will go, but there are barriers that has actually disrupted this, that hindered the adoption. And basically for us in the domestic market or in the downstream, we think that the distributive channels are not there compared to kerosene that you can get all over the place. And then the affordability is quite, you know, that the entry into the LPG, using LPG in your house or cooking gas is quite high for the indigent ones that are. So government has to do something on it, and I think we are hoping that they are trying to put something in place. And then the awareness, government has to stimulate demand in a way that a lot of people don't even understand. You go to the rural areas, they don't even know that there is an alternative to gas. So they need to be told, they need to be informed that these things are available so that there is a cleaner and much more affordable and safer medium of energy to use. So, and we have to, for us in the business, yes, there are some challenges which, and I hope that they will be able to come. Pricing currently is even a bit cheaper to import gas into Nigeria than to get from LNG. That's a very key, and I think the Minister of Petroleum, Minister of State said he was going to do something about it, because it's very, very odd that a lot of gas is being fled in Nigeria, yet cooking gas is much more expensive than importing. It's just absurd. I don't understand that. So, and I think that something has to be done, and done very, very fast too, because the market is growing. Because if you look at the a lot of the retail outlets all over Nigeria now, you could see skids all over the place. So the demand is growing, and if the demand is growing, the pricing has to be right, and the incentives has to be there for us in the business. Government has to support. So government has to put an enabling environment to enable even other investors to come in, because there is so much to do in that sector to grow the market. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nkechi. She kept saying government, government, government. So, I mean, we can't have government here and not saying one word. Can you please pass this mic to him? Back to government.
It's interesting how Victor takes one hat off and puts another one on top of me, isn't it? The truth of the matter is this. We're actually in the process of rolling out some initiatives for the LPG sector. When we did an analysis of the sector, we saw very clearly that the interventions that we did a few years ago with respect to directing that Nigerian LNG company have a domestic LPG supply obligation has worked, but hasn't worked enough. What we're trying to do is see how we can stimulate the entry of new players into the midstream, which is basically gas infrastructure. The other one, obviously, is the issue of gas processing. There's some gas processing plants that are currently in development and some in planning, right, that could help actually produce much more LPG than we have coming into the country today. What are we trying to do? We're trying to displace importation of LPG in favor of domestically produced LPG. Part of that initiative also required us to look at the tariff structure and the tax structure. The fiscal framework currently basically positions imported LPG at the expense of domestically produced LPG. And that's such an anomaly, it just doesn't make sense. So consistent with our oil policy and our gas policy is basically saying that we must ensure that we move our industry towards local processing. We are about to start tweaking the fiscal framework in favor of domestically produced LPGs, so that over time we start pushing back the imports. And I think that will help. That ultimately will go into the issue of pricing, right? Because you also displace the freight costs and everything. So we're looking at that. We're also taking a look at the infrastructure, such as the jetties. So we see that there's some bottlenecks around berthing of LPGs, right? Even when you move LPGs from Nigerian LNG, try to get into Lagos, you know, there's a problem. Or even the issue of the fact there's only one vessel that goes back and forth between Nigerian LNG and the coast. It just doesn't make sense. So we're trying to see how we can even liberalize that, so we can see that other people can come in and provide, you know, those, you know, vessel services, so that you're actually not fully independent, right, on one vessel, and to see where we can create more berthing space in Lagos and hopefully in Port Harcourt as well. So that's part of the work we're trying to do. But then also, we also see that there's an opportunity for faster penetration, in particular in the urban and peri-urban areas. So we're looking to see how we can discourage the use of firewood in urban areas. So we're speaking with the state governments and then with local governments. Their condition is we must be able to assure them that as they're displacing firewood use, we are bringing in the supplies. So, because what you don't want is you clean away one energy source and then you have a shortage in the other, right? So there's a certain amount of synchronicity that you have to do, right, in that area. We also see an opportunity for the manufacturing of LPG cylinders in the country. So people like Nkechi now, she's about completing the construction of a plant which we would have capacity to produce about 5 million cylinders of LPG cylinders. And that's huge. We'd like to see more of that. Part of the problem, again, goes to the tariff framework, which basically encourages importation of LPG cylinders. So the interventions we're also trying to do is to see how we can tweak the tariffs, right? And then encourage those who want to produce LPG cylinders domestically. And there are other issues also around making sure that these cylinders are standardized, and then the safety issues as well. So as of last month, we held a huge regulatory workshop within DPR, Standard Organizations of Nigeria, and other agencies, to just sensitize them around the issue of safety. Because if we don't solve the safety issues, then ultimately you're going to have resistance in the market, right, to this product that's potentially explosive, or clearly it has those properties. So the safety issue is just critical in it. So basically, we're looking at many solutions around this issue of domestic LPG production. Because we see that the deforestation that's going on in northern Nigeria is moving at such an alarming pace that we must take this as a national priority. But in there, ladies and gentlemen, is major opportunity, right? So I would counsel that those who are more entrepreneurial in this room, right, spend more time with us to better understand the detail of the activities we're about to introduce, to see, where the opportunities could be imminently. So that's the government response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we will talk about that later. But at this point in time, let's switch slightly to something different. And this has to do with the Azura Edo IPP. For those who do not know, Azura Edo IPP is located in Edo State. It's the newest power plant to take off, and it is done the way a commercial power plant should be done. There were around something like 15 financing parties putting together the financing. They benefited from World Bank partial guarantees and all sorts of very novel structure. It was complex, so in many ways it sets a new template on how power plants could be built. And better still, the financing equally covered Seplat providing gas supplies to the plant. And as I speak, I think a few weeks ago, they commissioned the plant, and so it is now running, and we are getting an additional 450, I think, so megawatts of power. Hope the transmission allowing will deliver, and hope too that there is enough money to pay and meet all the agreements. And unlike the other 10 that are dotted, which did not follow the pattern when they were building power plants without gas, it's never done anywhere, except here, of course. And that's why you have power plants, no gas. In the LNG business, I know well, before you even think of building, get an FID, you already have in one hand your gas supply contracts for 20 years, and then you have on the other hand your off-takers contract for another 20 years. So once you build, business starts. And that is exactly the model that they followed here in Azura IPP, and I'm glad they are working. And we're glad to have a gentleman from Seplat here, even though you're relatively new. I'm sure you've updated yourself. So tell us everything about this, and what can we learn from that in terms of gas to power moving forward?
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, or is it morning, everyone? So just before I go into the Azura case, I think the first thing is I sense a lot of frustration. You know, I can imagine as a child growing up, born just after the Civil War, we're still talking about power, and this talk just keeps going on, talk. But I think the way I like to look at this is, so indeed the lady in the previous panel session did talk about call for action, right? I think we're not going to move forward by blaming one another, whether you're blaming government or blaming. It's a collaboration, and we need to move forward. We have to look at the opportunity gap. So today we do about 3-5 megawatts, or is it gigawatts of power? But we have the capacity. We have installed capacity of about 12.5, and then Nigeria needs roughly, I heard about, is it 198 from the previous panel? So the gap to potential is huge. From go from 3-4 to about 900 and something is a massive opportunity bucket for all of us to play in. It's quite unfortunate with 198 TCF of gas. We're still in darkness, but I think there's hope, and let's focus on the future. And like you mentioned, if I look at the Azura's case, so what are we doing? So Seplat today, I think we're proud of what we've been able to achieve. How we believe by also taking action, you can change, you can make an impact to the world. You can also be a world-class investment case. We've invested close to $500 million, into that uncharted territory, really powering Nigeria. Today, the power in this hall, I can tell you, I hope it's on the grid, not on diesel. Seplat accounts for 30% of your power generation in Nigeria, something we're really proud of, 30%. That's material. So I'll then move on to the Azura case. So 4 points, just quick reflection around why Azura has probably become a template. First is Azura is a willing buyer, willing seller GSA, which backs a government position that if you're able to meet your DSO obligation, then you can then go and play in a different space where that's a bit more attractive. So it doesn't affect your DSOs. First meet your DSO, and then you can then look at other opportunity. The Azura case, the second point is around it shows that investors in power and gas producers can actually contract on commercial terms without necessarily going through all the complexity and drama around the DSA framework. That's the second point. The third point is Azura GSA is a bankable GSA with take or pay provisions, and what that means is you got payment guarantees, liabilities on the seller for non-supply. This type of a GSA basically then incentivizes investors who want to bring in cash. So in the previous session, they talked so much about cash. If you don't have cash, you really can't do much. You can speak all the grammar till cows come home, right? And when you go out to talk to investors to bring their money, they also have the option of either to bring their cash to invest here or take it somewhere else. So one of the biggest dilemma we face in the domestic gas market, I used to work the Western Gas Acts as a young reservoir engineer. We're selling gas at 11 cents per million scoff. Nobody will ever invest in gas at that rate. That's what's actually partly responsible for why we decide to go export as against going dome gas. But today we'll move forward from 11 cents. Now we'll talk about, is it 2.5? Bitter, right? 2.53. So we're making some inroads, but clearly we're not where we need to be yet. So I think the last point I would probably talk about it on the Azura point, which is I think is a template. The fourth one is, so this agreement is also on a take or pay basis, which means you're always guaranteed of some kind of revenue. So I think for me, those 4 points basically illustrates why Azura becomes a template. But again, they say the taste of the pudding is in the eating, right? So it's early days. We hope this works and becomes a practice worth replicating across the domestic gas power space. And it's something I guess a lot of investors would like to leverage on going forward. And that fits nicely into that gap to potential. How do you leverage on that opportunity, working with government and all the stakeholders and investors to basically try to make a world-class investment case going forward? Thank you. I hope we can light up Nigeria eventually.
Thank you. I hope we succeed in lighting up Nigeria. Mohammed, Power Man, what do you think about this template?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. So just to reemphasize, I think where I play as GE, I'm an equipment manufacturer. So why this is very important for me is, as much as a lot of people are speaking about bringing the molecules, we play in a space where these molecules can be used to bring power to people. Azura, as you said, is a very, very good project. And I think our hats off and congratulations to the entire team involved in bringing that to light. Is it a good model? Definitely. What makes it a good model? You know, the structure was very good in a sense where even the investors were comfortable getting involved in the project. You know, the pricing was right. The government basically has skin in the game because of this put-call option, also backed with the World Bank. Any investor who has a model like that, you're comfortable. So definitely that structure definitely works. The question is sustainability. How sustainable is that structure? Now, these are the 10 plants that you were talking about. If they all had the same sort of structure, they would be successful. But does the government really have the liquidity to bank each of these plants if, God forbid, something fails? And I think that is the real question. I think a problem that we consistently see is everybody looks at this sector in isolation. And a few of the guys in the panel before had talked about it. You cannot talk about solving gas alone, or talk about solving generation alone, or talk about solving distribution alone without looking at everything in its holistic form. For the gas players to be successful, for the consumers all the other way at the end to be successful, it has to be tied sort of a ring fence approach. So for me, a sustainable structure is one where the structure is viable on its own. The pricing is right in such a way that you might not necessarily need the government to step in to give any sorts of additional guarantees. If people are paying the right prices that kind of justify the investments of developers building these plants, everything kind of works. So while it's a cliche and it's something that we all need to solve for, I think there are some people who are doing some great work. I know state governments like Lagos State have started this Light Up Lagos concept, and the idea is supposed to be ring fencing both for all the way from generation to distribution to collections. And if we're able to build structures like this, I think it makes it very comfortable for investors and it makes it worthwhile. So to me, this is really what we should be trying to see, how we can have one conversation tying all the players within the value chain to make the best for everyone in it.
Thank you very much. Nice comments there. You've raised some very important questions, and I think I want Bitter to react to that question. You see, when LNG was built, and you know, and in 1999 we started saying, "Oh, this is a beautiful idea." We had T1 and 2, and then we extended it to T3, and then I was part of that team that went to raise finance abroad for T4 and 5, and we successfully did that, even though there were all sorts of challenges. And then we ended up, from the back of our pockets, built T6. Let's do T7. A whole, how many years? 10 years passed, no T7. It's almost like a certain animal called the pig. It's been promoted from pig B to pig A, I hear, you know, for those who can decode what I'm saying. So, having said that, we don't learn from structures. If there was one thing to be learned from Nigeria LNG, is that we should have many more incorporated JV entities like LNG. We can have them upstream everywhere. There's no reason. We don't need PSCs. We don't need lousy JVs. I can say that now because I've seen both. And I'm very authoritatively say that we need IJVs going forward. Okay? We should be able to have structures that can raise finance internationally, like Nigeria LNG has done. Okay? In the case of Nigeria, we even had 20-something financing party, and I was part of that financing. Here we are, we have got Azura doing exactly the same, except this tiny string it hangs on is the big question Mohammed raised. And I repeat, does the government have the liquidity to back the structure? Answer, sir.
Well, you know, the great thing about the work I do is that we don't hold the purse strings in the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. We actually create the money, we hand over to the Treasury. So that's actually more of a question for the Ministry of Finance. But let me say this. It's very clear that energy projects work when they're properly structured. That's why you can say very proudly that the Nigerian LNG project, right, always found money because it was very well structured. That's why Azura, right, was able to find money because of its structuring. We're even developing a Nigerian gas-fired commercialization program today, right, that's going to have a similar structure, right? Because we're very clear, right, that you've got to put the right structures in place. Now, when you look at the sector, you'll find about 3 types of power plants. There are power plants that don't have gas supply agreements. Why? Because the gas suppliers that have been attached to these power plants say, if you're not going to bring a guarantee, payment guarantee to my table, I'm sorry, I'm not going to supply the gas because I'm not in the business of going bankrupt. There are some legacy power plants that have gas supply, and as Mr. Thomas was saying this morning, don't have a strong payment structure, and the gas suppliers, you know, are bleeding. Now we're seeing the other extreme, where money followed a project that's investment grade because it had a partial risk guarantee behind it and also a government guarantee. That's how you do projects. Where we are today as a government is this. We do not want to put money behind upstream projects, if we can help it, taking the view that the upstream is a mature industry and should be able to sufficiently finance itself. Yes, we see that potentially there could be problems around the Treasury if we have many of these projects being structured around PRGs. But maybe that will behind importation of products, which is costing us trillions of naira on an annual basis. It's a policy choice. And somebody suggests to me that in a matter of a few months, I don't want to mention the year, right, that issue will fall towards the power sector. It's very clear where the earnings are. Right. So that's, you know, what I would like to leave with Victor. I definitely always vote for the power sector because that's where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck.
Okay. Thank you. Fingers crossed. Time will tell. Now, let's move on. Rural dwellers. I think we touched on it when we were talking about, which is part of all these movements and all the killings in parts of the country, you know, because there's no grass, there are no trees, because we are converting the trees to firewood. All these people who fetch firewood every day in the rural areas, the millions of people, if they were using gas, those trees will still be there. So looking ahead, so we're now back to Nkechi. He will tell us, how will you, what can you guys do to help these rurals? Can you donate gas cookers to them, you know, those ones mounted on gas, so that they can all have it free of charge? And then, but they will pay to renew liquid content only. What are you guys willing to do? Tell us.
Well, thank you. LPG remains the lowest of the different kinds of energy. Okay. LPG remains the lowest in terms of charcoal, kerosene, and I think the firewood accounts for almost about 70% of the total energy needs in Nigeria for cooking, and which is very, very poor. And that accounts for the deforestation, and which is a key challenge for a key health challenge, especially for our women. And that's part of why we are, in terms of advocacy too, with the women advocating that the men should, who are basically those in power, to try as much as possible to make a change for us to shift. The adoption of LPG in Nigeria has to be increased so that our women would basically live a much more healthier life. You know, so that comes in there because almost $1.5 billion has been used as subsidy in terms of kerosene subsidy in Nigeria. You know what that means. I have just mentioned in my last discussion that the office of the petroleum minister and I think the vice president, they've set up an enhancement committee or whatever in terms of looking at how do we drive the adoption level of LPG in Nigeria, which I have mentioned is very commendable, and I think they're the right course. But then the entry, I equally mentioned that there are three basic things that actually hinder the adoption level in Nigeria, and one of them is the high cost, affordability of the entry cost of using an LPG or whatever. And that is where Techno Oil has played a very significant role in that. The plant which we are about to commission in the next 1 month is almost completed. Just the sheets that are the wharf waiting to be cleared so that we can start rolling out the cylinders. And the cylinders are the number of 50 kg, 12.5, and 6 kg. The 6 kg is already adapted for the rural dwellers, whereby you just pick and go. And I am looking at whereby the government can do an intervention so that at least that entry cost will be eliminated. But I don't know what they are thinking, whether they are looking at imports or whatever, but I believe that that is the way to go. So that, because there are quite enormous opportunities in the LPG's value chain. There are enormous opportunities, and the only way to go by actually encouraging others, because I believe that our plant is basically the only one that is almost about to be commissioned. Others have to come in. But if you kill Techno Oil, I definitely think that no other company will want to go that way. So that's
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Techno Oil, more grease to your elbows. We need more Techno Oils. Yeah. And,
thank you.
Well done. I like 6 kg cylinders for rural dwellers. I think that is good. But we will need people who will bankroll this. I think there's a role for DFIs. It's not just government. There are lots of things we can benefit from, but sometimes Nigeria opts out. If Nigeria opts in, you'll be amazed. There's a lot of money out there for us to tap. I think if we can tap it, then you use that money, it's like grants, make it available freely. That's the only way to do it. But more talk, less work. I think now we have to walk the talk. So at this point, let's engage the audience. I think we need the mic roved. So, yeah, so we will need your name, your affiliation, and not longer than 30 seconds, whether it's a comment or a question, please. We'll take the first three. Okay, first four. Two from here, two from there. Each side, yeah.
Okay, I would begin with the madam here, the gentleman here. Apologies, your hands didn't go up on time. I'll take the gentleman here. Can I allow people that have not, forgive me, Caleb and the gentleman. Let me take this too. Please bear with me. Eh? If we have more time, we'll take some more. Thank you.
My name's Chidima Obi. I run a company called Indu Energy in my present life. My question is on subsidy. Honestly, I really don't want to hear anything about government subsidizing anything, because the people who benefit from the subsidy are the elites and the people in government. It doesn't come down to the common man. So what can government do for us? I ask you, BT, is that all these long policies that you're talking about, to get into the office as an SME entrepreneur, to get audience with the government, is almost impractically impossible. And please, just one minute, 1 second. So what I want to say what I want to ask is, please, how will the common man in the village buy this cylinder and get the gas at an affordable price? If that's the intervention we get out of this room today, that it gets down to the people that is meant for and not the business people who can afford to get the loan, that will be one thing that we can do, apart from lighting up Nigeria, which we are all struggling up. Thank you.
My moderator said 30 seconds. I think I'll hold the microphone now to the amount. Can I do that, sir? Okay, thank you very much. There's a second person here. Okay. I'll come back to you, sir. Will you do 30 seconds or should I hold the mic? 30 seconds, thank you.
Patrick is my name. I work for Bank of Industry and I sympathize a lot with Nkechi and then Prof. But my question is to Nkechi, how did you go about financing the plant? Because I can remember talking to yourself and your team to come to Bank of Industry, but hey, you did not come. What happened?
Okay, I have two questions on this row. Please, I'd like to talk to those who, was it you, sir? No, forgive me, was it you? You're the first person here? Okay, it was you, thank you, just to be sure.
Thank you. My name is Kachikwu. In my old life, like she said, I used to be a development geologist and I spent some 24 years doing it. My question goes to the minister's technical advisor, I think, Energy, right? When are we going to go back to marginal field that everybody has waited for long? We thought it's going to happen last year, this year. You know, it's a space that everybody needs if we're going to light up Nigeria. Just like what Seplat is doing. We need to do mini plants and mini gas production around. And that's the only way it can work. The long pipeline couldn't work because you know it has not worked. So when is marginal field coming? Are people still thinking about it or is it put out of the shelf for now? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Omoyele Babalola. I have a company called Lola Bars Enterprises. My question goes to the technical advisor to the Minister of Petroleum. Please, sir, we have a lot of abandoned projects. We have Olokola, somewhere in Ondo State. We have many other in Dada. What is you people doing exactly about all these abandoned projects? Second, Madam Nkechi, please, we entrepreneurs, we want to buy into that idea of selling your cylinder to the people in the rural area. I can take it as a task. But please, how are we going to sit down and discuss this thing out that it will benefit the people in the area? It's not only the cylinder, the gas. How is the gas getting there? Because you can sell the cylinder, they can't only use the cylinder, they need the gas. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, sir, because we're streaming live, we want to take one question online, if you don't mind, and we'll take one from Mr. Malize. Where's the question online? Let's take one from online because we're streaming live for the benefit of those who are watching us live. And this person says, can I have it on the big screen? Okay, where's the question? This is from Dr. Kemi. Okay, Dr. Kemi Omololu Oluloyo. Hashtag lights up Nigeria. I didn't get you. No, I need a question. What the panel, your panel, what are they doing to contribute to youth development with regards to the number of militants in Port Harcourt? Please destroy energy platforms because of no opportunities. Dr. Oluloyo, let me not start something I can't finish now. Let's take from Mr. Malize and we'll wrap that.
Thank you. My name is Cyprian Malize. I work for Millennium Nigeria Limited. And Nkechi and Techno, I commend you guys for all your fantastic job you're doing. But a very important thing there is, what plans are you people making in regards to the education of the people in the village, in the rural areas, as to the security of using that gas and cylinder?
Thank you very much. Over to you, sir. I'm back to you.
Thank you very much. So we've got quite a few questions, and I hope those who will answer it are warming up. The first came from Chidima, of previous life, or present life. Subsidy, you think subsidy is wrong and this is for airlines and government officials are the ones who benefit? And then you equally had a question on cylinders for common man. So I think two people are answering the question. Maybe part A for Deneji and then part B. Nkechi, you have the lion's share of the question, so let us start with. Please let him.
Right. Chinma of the present life. Let me firstly clarify a very important issue you touched on. It's not that difficult to get audience in government. On a daily basis, people come to see the minister. On a daily basis, all you have to do, let me just help you through the process. Just write in, state what you need a meeting for. There's a whole backlog, but we respond. You will say, look, let them come, this person comes. So they give you an appointment to come and see the minister. People come every day to see the minister. So it's not impossible. And then, in my own case, those who know me, that door's wide open. Just walk into my office and come and have your chat. So it's actually, that's a bit of a fallacy that the doors of government are not open. I've just told you, write in to the minister. Yeah, that's all you have to do. Write in to the minister, ask for an appointment, and state why you would like to see him. That's all you have to do. And that's what everybody else does. Anyway. Okay, subsidies. I don't agree that subsidies are not important. What's more important is why you target the subsidies to. We have used subsidies very wrongly in Nigeria for the very, very wrong things. We've made the case that for LPG penetration, if you look at the issue that most people in the villages are picking their firewood straight from the bush, using them to cook. The question is, how do you convince them to start paying for LPG? How do you do that? Because clearly, there's a poverty issue in our villages. It helps if we do what most other governments have done, which is firstly, you've subsidized the entry cost for those small stoves and the small cylinders. That is a great start. But the ultimate still comes to the issue as to what then happens to the liquid content, which is a big issue, right? That massive LPG penetration in the country, that would have helped subsidize this liquid content. The legislature says no. They would rather prefer that we use the subsidy for infrastructure. Now that's such an innocuous expression, infrastructure. What type of infrastructure? Is it road? Is it rail? Is it pipelines? Is it port infrastructure? So if you don't have targeted subsidies to shift use away from products that are more expensive to a product that is so available naturally in the country, and have that fuel switch, then you got a problem. So that's the issue we're still on currently with the National Assembly.
Yeah, I'd like to chip in something here. If you look at the LPG distribution in Nigeria today, you'll find some really very funny things. For the past 50 years, we've been bringing in LPG into Nigeria. We have available in Lagos 17,000 metric ton tanks to receive LPG for the entire Nigeria. Recently, by the grace of God, we receive about 50% of our LPG needs in Nigeria today from NLNG. NLNG is a stone throw from Port Harcourt. There's no storage facility in Port Harcourt. You take it from NLNG, you bring it to Lagos. You have a 30,000 metric ton vessel that brings in the LPG. You have 17,000 tons available in Lagos. It drops 17,000. It waits there for a couple of weeks to deliver the balance of the 13,000. So you have the transportation cost from Port Harcourt to Lagos. You have a demurrage to pay. Then you now put them in little tankers and drive them from Lagos back to Port Harcourt. What is happening? You've escalated the price. Now, what I expect the government to do is to try and provide policies that will make it easier for Nigerians to build more storage facilities in the East. I take a look at Senegal. Senegal is about the size of Lagos. It uses LPG 5 times than the entire Nigeria. Its volume of LPG is 5 times we use in the entire Nigeria. That's little Senegal. So what are we saying here? We need to create an enabling environment to drive this gas to the grassroots. There was a time it was muted that the federal government was in a relationship with a Chinese firm to produce cylinders massively and then bring it back to Nigeria and distribute as per BVM. If you have a bank verification number, then you're entitled to one. If we had 6 kg cylinders that government can bankroll, so this is distributed to the grassroots in the villages and drive it in, and then make policies that will allow some of us now that we're building a tank farm in Port Harcourt to try and deepen that in the East. There's some, Dozie has done some. What we're trying to do for them, I'm so grateful that Nkechi is on board because we'll be talking to her soon to see what she can help us do, is to create franchises in the East. Why franchises? Because if you create franchise, if you can build about 3-4 refilling plants in all the major towns in the East, and then franchise them out in such a way that whoever takes them, you build them, they take it over. We don't want government in it. They'll take it over, then give you bank guarantees. then they will know, because they've given you a bank guarantee, they'll be serious. They will drive it in and make the sales. And you hand it over to them, and then it will create a lot of jobs in the towns, in the villages, to help drive this in. If they have the LPG cylinders, you can bet in the next 5 years, Nigerian utilization will be about 50 times of what is being done in Senegal. But we need to increase the availability of storage facilities right down the coast of Nigeria, putting the cylinders out there, and then you will flood the market with LPG, and it will take over immediately. That is the honest truth. And then the fact that the internally produced LPG is more expensive than imported LPG, that something should be done immediately about that. I don't see why you should pay VAT for locally produced, and imported ones you don't pay any VAT. It doesn't make sense. So we need some policies to be able to help us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Nkechi, a quick one, because we've got to wrap up the session in the next 2-3 minutes.
Okay, the first question is how we're able to finance the LPG cylinder production plant. Well, it has to do with market forces, and Access Bank actually came to our rescue, and they financed the project, and that's just it. But we definitely will come back to BOI. When it comes back to our working capital, we actually need you to produce cylinders that would, the 5 million cylinders, we need you. So we're definitely going to be there. For somebody asks, how do you assess us to buy our cylinders? Please take no oil. We're on the website. We are directly almost there by Oriental Hotel here. You can see our office. You can come over there and see the commercial manager, and he will register you as a distributor to get our cylinders. And then somebody was asking about, I just want to lend a voice to the subsidy. I know Ogbechie has answered that. And globally, anywhere the intervention for penetration has been so high, in any of the country, there has always been government intervention. There has always been government intervention, so Nigeria will not be an exception. And I believe that because the intervention by government has been very, very small, that's why our penetration level has been very, very low. So government has to scale up. I don't know what they want to do, whether it's subsidy or whether, but definitely they just must intervene for it to work. And that is how other countries that are up there has been able to achieve success. The safety awareness and emphasis, I believe that the private sector is getting there in terms of distributive channels. Most of the filling stations now, you find out that there are skids. So you end up being that it's easier to get LPG today than in the last 2 years or 3 years. So we are getting there, and we are getting there. So, other question? Is there another one? I think so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, there are 3 other questions, but I've reviewed them. They are not directly relevant to the theme of this session of the conference, which is optimizing gas as bridge to energy need. And so we can always discuss them on the sidelines if you don't mind, because of time management. Okay, by way of summary, is that Nigeria is in a good position to optimize gas if it implements all its projects that it has, and loads and loads of projects we do have. And there are indications now that some of those projects will now come on stream. At least we do know that T7, Train 7 of Nigeria LNG, will shortly be embarked upon, and that is a very good thing. We do know that come 2019, the Dakuku project will be off the drawing board, and there'll be plenty of gas opportunities, because you do need gas to drive fertilizer plants petrochemical plants, and you'll be flooded with plenty of LPG, I'm sure there will be. So the future is gas and will grow, and the future is equally renewables. Let me quickly add to correct the impression that one displaces the other. We definitely need both for sustainable development, given the fact that the future world we want to build is a low carbon world. And there's a lot to learn, as we could hear from the gentleman from Seplat, from the Azura Edo model, and I'm sure we'll be able to do it. But there is going to be constraint, because I can hear very clearly how many projects can the Treasury back. Okay, I can read between those lines. There's only a very finite project. So let's hope that Nigeria becomes more prosperous so we can back more projects. But there's one thing we never talked about today, but which I think you need to know: demography. Nobody's addressing it. No Nigerian, from the highest to the lowest, is addressing that. On New Year Day, 20,000 Nigerians were born in this country. On New Year Day. If you multiply that by 360, what do you get? 7 million Nigerians will be born by the end of the year. Where will they be fed? And by 2050, currently we are the 7th most populous country in the world. By 2050, we'll be the 3rd most populous country in the world. They will need energy. So we need energy from every possible source. So whatever we're doing now is still scratching the surface. I think I want to stop there as food for thought. I hope you did enjoy the session, and have fun. I hand over to the MC.
Thank you very much. Yes, please, Mrs. Chizor, Malize, you will come join them for a quick group photograph. Let's give them one more round of applause, please. Thank you. Thank you very much to our moderator. Thank you, Mrs. Obi. We thank you, Mr. Okon. Please join them for the group photograph. Thank you, Professor Ezigbo. We thank you immensely. Abimbola, thank you. The man from GE with the big voice, Mohammed. Thank you very much. And of course, BT Adeniji, we thank you. Yes, we're switching gears immediately to the final panel session. Let me make this appeal. When we are pressed for time, as we are currently, it will be difficult to take all the questions and comments that you want to ask. So my apologies for unable to take your question or comment. But please, next time when you're invited for an event, do well to kindly come on time. So we'll start on time, and we'll have all the time in the world to do all the interventions that we want. When we don't come on time, we struggle with this time. We're going, as I said, straight to the 3rd plenary session on unlocking opportunities in the downstream sector, achieving supply and distribution excellence. That will be our very next session. We'll run that for another hour, tops an hour 30 minutes. We'll close out that again, and that will take us to lunch, which will signal the end of this conference for 2018. As they get down, can we give them another round of applause? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so very much. To moderate this panel is the founder and CEO of Kari Asset Management Limited. Okay. Gentlemen, please, if you can just take your seats in the audience. Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. If you can just take your seats in the audience, and we would... Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, Prof, thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Okon. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
Gabriel Ogbechie, Engineer Ogbechie. Please, can we just settle down and run through this session, please? Can Can we please welcome our moderator and engineer Ogbechie to the podium, please? Can we give them a round of applause, please? Let's welcome them. Thank you very much. Thank you. Also on the panel is the Managing Director, CEO of Etana PLC, Mahmoud Tuko. Mahmoud Tuko is represented this afternoon by the Director of Sales at Etana. Let's welcome Nnamdi Obiagu. Nnamdi, you're welcome. Also on the panel is Executive Director at Bank of Industry and former Managing Director of the Bank of Industry, Mr. Waheed Olagunju. He's represented this afternoon by the Head of Enterprise at the Bank of Industry. Let's welcome Mike Oye. Mike, you're welcome. We'd like to also welcome our lead speaker for this session, Chief Executive Officer, Engr Retail Oil and Gas. Let's welcome Yomi Awobokun. You're welcome, sir. So, of course,
Thank you very much. Just like the moderator, the MC has said, we are running out of time, so we'll try and make it as brief as possible. And I said a couple of us want to eat, have lunch. So we just get the substance of the presentation from the lead speaker, and then we will intervene to discuss some of the talking points, and we'll also want to have feedback from the audience. So on that note, I'll call on Yomi to give us whatever your choice.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Toughest sessions are just before lunch and right after lunch. So I'm going to make this hopefully as quickly as possible, and then we'll engage with questions, and then hopefully we can release you to lunch. I want to thank the organizers for the opportunity, and also members of the panel, distinguished members of the panel. My name is Yomi Awobokun, and I work for Engr Retail and Supply. I have a few slides, very few, just to talk to you about the opportunities in the sector. If the slides can come up so that I can proceed. Fantastic. Next slide. And I've titled the slide, The Audacious Sector. I know that the last session was filled with war and tales of war. I differ. I believe that there would always be challenges. The challenges in the oil and gas sector in the UK, challenges in the oil and gas sector in the US, challenges all over the world. So we can spend some time on the challenges, but certainly I must show you the opportunities. I will not be sharing my business plan, so you may not see numbers. I will discuss the opportunities, and I'll leave the panel and yourselves and myself to discuss them broadly. And so please, the numbers that I will throw out are general numbers, and we can discuss the framework, but not specific. I wanted to start with the global industry, just to, espouse and talk about some of the major developments, especially in the last few months. I'm sure you all have access to cable TV, so your attention span is stretched either way, whether it's North Korea that you are concerned about, or next slide. North Korea and the impact on global oil, potential peace and denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, huge impact on global oil. Other major headlines in that space are current crude oil price. I'm not sure it's hit $80, but as at this morning, crude oil prices were close to $80. And so I'm that hasn't gone ahead. That was supposed to unravel and introduce into the sector new opportunities. We expect that to unravel in 2019. Interesting developments as well. At these oil prices, U.S. shale producers also get more competitive. And to prove that, last month, we're told that the first shipment of U.S. shale went as far as Israel. And if you know your geography, Israel is closer to us than it is the U.S. Bringing it home, these oil prices, to us, it's boosting our revenues. So very quickly, our government has more money to spend. Oil-dependent nations like Nigeria, all of a sudden have more revenues. Specifically, you've heard about the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. That plan, all of a sudden, also gets a bit of a stimulus or a catalyst. Our government, executive especially, has more ammunition to carry out the reforms and invest in infrastructure and some of the things that they've promised. There's unfortunately more pressure on subsidized products. There's been a lot of conversations today about levying the deregulated products to fund LPG. Very interesting debate and argument. We had no time to challenge Mr. Adeniji on that. But what we know for sure is that as oil prices climb, the government, directly or indirectly, will have to subsidize gasoline, PMS petrol, at the levels that the landing price, international landing prices are. We may be seeing up to $1.5 billion of direct or indirect fuel subsidy this year at the rate we're going. We're currently subsidizing that by about 40, 50 naira a liter. There will, however, be an increase in economic activity, especially in the oil and gas field, especially for the production and exploration segments, because at these prices, a lot of their deals all of a sudden become more viable. And most importantly, there is a massive foreign exchange boost, potential for better debt management, potential for better savings, and some of the things that we heard that one government didn't do, the next government now has an opportunity to walk their talk. Africa specifically, and Nigeria, huge opportunities across the continent. Energy is a major sector. And what we're seeing right across the continent is investments in refining, investments in exploration and production. I have a few on the slide. This morning was an announcement from Uganda about previously unviable refinery transaction now being signed. South Africa and Kenya deepening their investments in LPG. There's been a lot of talk about LPG. And I also threw up some numbers. LPG penetration is measured in something called use per capita. The current use per capita in Nigeria is less than 2 kg per capita. And in these countries making these investments, average per capita use is double ours. Let's put it into perspective though. UK use per capita, United Kingdom, is only 7. So, and that's because there are numerous other alternatives to cooking gas as electricity, which is primarily the other alternative. And so we're less than 2, huge opportunity. And you heard the last speaker talking about 7 million people to be fed in addition to those already existing every year. So certainly a lot more mouths to feed, and LPG is one of the sources. Local oil service companies, local organizations in the country, especially in the sector, also beginning to look out. There's a huge, huge window for our companies. Some of the companies led by people on the stage are beginning to go to Ghana, looking at opportunities in East Africa, looking at opportunities in the north of the continent as they gain or strengthen their balance sheets and gain credibility. Interestingly, U.S. exports or U.S. imports of Nigerian crude was at a 5-year high last year. Again, showing that there's global growth, but most importantly that our crude, there's still appetite for our crude. Numbers suggest that 48% increase in U.S. imports of Nigerian crude compared to 2016, which is very positive. Our minister, Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum, recently at his presentation suggested that there's up to 100 billion required to be spent in the oil and gas space over the next 5 years, and that spend is right across the value chain. You would have heard about 2 or 3 big projects being announced. There's a pipeline by consortia, including a local Nigerian indigenous company from the southwest going all the way to Kano, Katsina, carrying gas. And that pipeline is supposed to open up opportunities for new industries and other businesses. Specifically, rise in crude prices usually would boost allocation from federal to state governments. Why is that important? A lot of the money spent by the states in Nigeria essentially comes from that distribution of proceeds. In the last year, we saw a rise in the last quarter to about 6.4 trillion naira in the last quarter of 2017. International organizations are also keen to invest in alternatives. So the AFDB recently announced an investment in solar, which will include Nigeria and a lot of the northern or desert countries in Africa on solar. And just last night, NNPC released 30 names for what is called the crude list. I'm not sure you guys understand how that works, but 30 companies have been contracted to support the NNPC to trade its crude oil. We're talking about opportunities. And why are these SNP nets, why are they important? They're important because it's very easy for you to listen to the challenges in the sector, easy for you to listen to the naysayers, and for you to go home assuming that the sector isn't buoyant, that there isn't a lot of business to do, that people aren't making money, and that you cannot also tap into those opportunities as they open up. And if you open your eyes very widely, I want you to look at the stage at the gentleman sitting and ask yourself, do they look like they don't have support financially? The oil and gas people. Do they look like that? Fantastic, they're not. So I want to talk about the opportunities. Now, I'm going to talk about 7 key principles which these opportunities are wrapped around. The Minister of Petroleum announced something called the 7 big wins. And the reason why I'm taking this approach is that I don't want to share with you a business plan. I want to excite your senses. I want you to relate with the opportunities, but looking at them from the lens of the news that you read. And so these are the 7 big wins. I'm sure you heard the minister announce them in 2016, and a lot of work has been done and is being done on them. And the first is policy and regulation. You heard on the stage this afternoon about policy challenges. You heard about LPG policy challenges, at least I heard that. And that is the first focus area for the Oil and Gas Ministry for the country. And we're starting that with something called ease of doing business. Now, I do business in Nigeria. I do business in 5, 6 states in the country. And the first thing that hits you when you start doing business is how difficult it is to navigate the regulators and to understand federal to state regulation and how it affects your business, especially if you do any business in Lagos State. Any business in Lagos State, whether it's building or building related, there's probably 3 or 4 agencies you have to work with. I must say, however, that the process is a lot more straightforward. There are a lot more agencies, however, the processes are a lot more straightforward. Most of the agencies are control agencies to their revenue counterparties. And so the first focus area, policy and regulation, I think the opportunity therein is to understand the challenges that you're facing and understand the state or the federal government's path to resolving those challenges. Government is working to align our sector, the oil and gas sector, the downstream especially, with the ease of doing business framework, especially as it relates to liquefied petroleum gas. You must have heard that the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill is making significant success. And inside that bill are huge opportunities for medium and small-scale businesses, which hitherto did not exist before. Some of the agencies of government and the NNPC today existing will not exist in the nature in which they exist. They certainly would exist either as regulators or as operators. Indeed, some of those operators would be listed on the exchange and would compete with companies like our company and other companies of persons in the room. Most importantly, there's consistent and improving positive narrative about the industry. And why is narrative important? Narrative is important because it's a global community, and the worse the narrative about the industry, the worse the availability of credit, for instance, and support, and expertise and training, etc. And so the first opportunities lie around understanding the policy and the regulatory framework of the industry. I'm not saying there's still no challenges. It's still a subsidized and a regulated PMS industry. But even that, therein lies opportunities for sales, for marketing, for training and development, for distribution. I'll come to that. Second, real quick, is the gas revolution being spoken about already today and other events. The government published in 2017 something called a National Gas Policy. That policy makes demands on the government and the private sector to do certain things, including domestic obligation of the IOCs and the government for gas, LPG, distribution processes and organizations and structures for LPG, focus on LNG and CNG and other uses for natural gas, and distributing that focus right across the country, support industry and support enterprise. And what that means is that you can't set up businesses in places where you would naturally not think about because of power, because all of a sudden there is a vibrant, growing CNG market and you can get power to light up your business. Government is also supporting the LPG initiative using its own infrastructure. I'm not sure you're aware. The NNPC owns 9 butanization plants right across the country, first-class infrastructure, which at the moment isn't put to great use as a result of some of the anomalies in the system. There are now incentives to support and promote LPG infrastructure. You heard the CEO or the vice chair of Techno talk about local production of cylinders. In Nigeria, there's average, we say there's 40 million homes, and we say only 7 million of those homes are able to cook with LPG. And the key reason is the switching from kerosene to LPG. The key reason is that switch cost is really the LPG cylinder. Those cylinders typically cost between $15 to $20 each. And what's happening now is there are now incentives to local producers of cylinders and associated equipment to produce locally. And BOI is here to talk about that. The government has set aggressive LPG growth plans. We say that the latent demand of LPG is 1 million tons. At the moment, as of 2017, Nigeria consumed about 500,000 tons. And so whatever business that supports LPG, understand that that business in the minimum can grow 100% in the first instance immediately without even reaching saturation. There's a massive business and investment drive under the 7 big wins. LPG, government is supporting the consolidation of players in the sector. So there are many oil and gas players, many downstream players, and all of a sudden we're seeing opportunities for consolidation. Indeed, there's already some partnerships and consolidation, but most importantly, we're seeing our businesses attract FDIs and LDIs. FDIs, monies from abroad, and LDIs, local, local wealth, being attracted to our oil and gas businesses to boost them and help them consolidate. We're able to exploit, and you can exploit tax incentives as well. There's a pioneer tax now available and also being benefited from by our industry. Technology, the oil and gas sector is perhaps the least technology savvy sector in the country, but all of a sudden we're seeing technology coming in to ease transparency in supply and distribution. Now, a lot of consumers don't see that technology yet, but what happens is for businesses who've deployed that technology, they actually earn a fatter margin. So more specifically, we're seeing retail stations use value chain optimization technologies and strategies to boost their margins. The government says earn about 6 naira. Those stations are able to earn 7 to 8 naira because of elimination of fixed cost and reducing or converting their fixed cost to variable cost. Sector is getting increasingly more liberalized. Once upon a time, there were certain products that we couldn't consider retailing, and a lot of those are now on the table for dialogue with the government. Lubricants, a lot more blending of lubricants in Nigeria. I don't know if you guys are aware. Sales and blending of lubricants is directly proportional to car density and the automobile policy. Government is publishing standards and implementing the framework for aggressive road expansion and rail distribution, also incentivizing those. And the direct benefactors of that, one of those is our industry. We are able to move products by rail now from Lagos to as far as Kano, both bulk and packed. So both lubricants in boxes and also liquefied products. And that sector is dying for investment. Number 4, real quick, no point discussing the new refinery potentially being built in Lekki Free Trade Zone. I don't know if you've been there, but I assure you that the opportunities those refineries or that refinery presents are huge, from housing to manpower requirements to services, support services for product handling, etc. Let me round up real quick. In addition to that, there's 10 other modular refineries that the government has approved and investments are already going into. Security, huge opportunity for those in that space. First, the Niger Delta security, but also security requirements right across the country. Securing oil and gas pipelines, securing depots, securing terminals, securing rail carriages with products in them, if that's your space. It's a $1 billion industry. At most of the stations in Nigeria, there's 24/7 CCTV with inverters, keeping those CCTVs working. Stakeholder management and coordination, that has everything to do with conferences like this, engaging office holders, engaging policy, senators. Those are specific skill areas that people can focus on. And then most importantly, and last but not the least, transparency and efficiency. I've mentioned a bit about that, but everything that technology can do by way of making distribution easier, ensuring products that are bought are of the best quality and tested, ensuring that services at the forecourts and at the terminals and all the downstream points of sale are benchmarked to international standards. All those are completely different and potential opportunity for investors and practitioners. Ladies and gentlemen, our time is far spent. I hope that we can spend the next few moments with these teasers discussing specific opportunities that you have in mind. I hope that some of the challenges that exist do not deny us of focusing on the opportunities that exist. I want to thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yomi, for a well thought out and well delivered presentation. He has set the ground rule, the tone for the discussion that's going to follow. Interestingly, the downstream sector is basically a logistic business. It's all about how quickly you can take product from one point, how efficiently you can store the product, how easy it is for you to move the product from your storage facility to the point of sales or the point of interface with the final consumers. We have somebody here who actually straddled the entire value chain, right from the point storage up to the vessel movement to the retail stations, and he has one of the largest retail stations among the local operators. So we're going to ask Gabriel, I'm going to be asking Gabriel Ogbechie, how do we improve on the efficiency of the downstream sector, particularly the downstream oil and gas sector? As we know, that sector is laden with a lot of difficulties. It's a sector where cost optimization is actually the sing song. Today we have a lot of operators that joined that sector at the period of boom that have all shut down. Before the start of this session, I was discussing with my side, and he was telling me about a number of facilities that are up for sale because either those people are unable to optimize their costs or they have not been able to achieve the level of efficiency you need in that sector. It's a sector where 50 kobo could make all the difference, particularly given the fact that it's regulated. In fact, it's going to be even worse when it is deregulated. Well, it will be about how effectively and efficiently you can handle your logistic operations. So I'll be asking Gabriel, how exactly is he able to achieve efficiency at a period when competition, they say already a shakeout in the industry and a lot of the competitors are actually folding up?
Thank you very much. Let me start by commending Mr. Yomi Awobokun for his very wonderful presentation. I don't want to start by talking about the challenges. Let's not start by looking at the problems. One thing I know is that regardless of what the market thinks, regardless of the challenges we may be having in the country today, the downstream sector of the Nigerian oil and gas industry still presents a lot of opportunities. It's, I tell people that the cash flow you have in downstream, it's unparalleled. It's a cash business. You drive into a petrol station, you buy fuel, you pay cash. It's not like I'm going to pay you tomorrow. As you're buying the fuel, you're paying cash. And one thing is that regardless of the changes we have in the industry, the retail outlet will always remain the interface between the industry and the public. So you never go wrong with the retail outlet. Whether Dangote builds a refinery, whether all our refineries in the country gets revitalized, the retail outlet will always remain the interface with the public and will always remain very viable. So the first opportunity I will talk about are the opportunities on the retail space. Nigeria is a country of 190 million people today. The last moderator for the last session told us that on New Year Day alone, 20,000 babies were born. I mean, it tells you the rate at which our population is exploding. And as long as this population keeps expanding, people will keep needing energy, people will keep moving around, we need to fuel our cars, so the opportunity in the retail space will always remain. Another opportunity, incidentally, logistics, trucking. Nigeria today, we run a regulated market where government says petrol is 145 naira per liter. So whether it's 145 naira in Lagos, it's 145 naira in Abuja, it's 145 naira in Kano, it's 145 naira in Maiduguri. Now for that to happen, it means somebody has to pay the cost of transportation, which is equalization. Today, if you move fuel from Lagos to Maiduguri, government pays you about 17 naira per liter. So it means that if you move a 40,000 liter truck from Lagos to Maiduguri, you're going to get about 700,000 naira on transportation cost alone. If you can do that trip, Maiduguri, you can make Maiduguri in 3-4 days max. If you can make that trip 3 times, in a month, you gross 2 million naira. In a year, you can easily gross 24 million naira. If you take away your cost of maintaining the truck, I tell you that truck will pay for itself in 1 year. And these are subtle opportunities, and we've seen a lot of investments quietly move in those directions in terms of bridging. There are opportunities in the LPG space. I recall that years ago, as recent as the early 2000s, there was a lot of investment into that space. because that is one direction that the market is going. Another opportunity, which thankfully Mr. Awobokun also broached on that, incidentally, is modular refining. Nigeria, we need to refine our crude oil and convert this crude oil to refined petroleum products in whatever way. That we produce crude oil, transport it across the world to a place where they refine it and then transport it back. I mean, it doesn't make sense when we have the crude oil coming out of the ground. Whether you can do the Dangote 600,000 barrels per day, huge refinery, or you can just do a topping plant of 2,000 barrels per day to convert it, even if all you can do is convert it to diesel. Just do something. Let us begin to get value out of crude. The moderator asked me about the challenges. The industry today has its own challenges while I round up. I know time is not on our side. And one of the biggest challenges we have is too much regulation. I mean, the government should allow the private sector to drive this industry. I mean, a lot of investments, a lot of private capital have gone into it. But lately, instead of government to retreat and cede this space to the private sector, we've seen the government advance more and more, increasingly making the private sector people to be increasingly relevant. Today, 100% of the petrol that is consumed in this country is imported by NNPC. As recent as 5 years ago, NNPC accounted for less than 30% of the fuel we're consuming in this country. Today, they account for 100%. Meanwhile, people have done a lot of investment in the sector. I think at this point, I'll give up the microphone because of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. I'm sure we all agree he did justice to the opportunities. In fact, it was quite upbeat. He took it from the positive perspective, the opportunities in the downstream sector, not ignoring the challenges. I will now move on to Nnamdi. Nnamdi, you work with a company that has a lube plant, and it's one of the major distributors of one of the lubricants. The Nigerian space, a couple of Nigerian operators are going into the lubricant business. We're seeing a lot of investment in that sector as well. Can you talk us through the opportunities in that sector and the challenges as well that investors should be wary of or conscious of, even as they try to explore those opportunities?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you for previous speakers. Just to, let me address your question squarely. In terms of lubricants in the Nigerian space, you're basically two major segments. You have the international brands and the local brands, and both are doing extremely well. In the past, it used to be, this is one segment of the downstream where regulation is not at the level where it's stifling. But at the same time, when there was a neglect in regulation, it caused certain problems for that industry. In the past, a lot of people entered the lubricants business with the intentions of simply bringing in base oils. They were not really very focused on the quality that was delivered into the market. So you have a lot of people importing that. To curb that, government tried to impose certain rules around that, like you must have a blending facility before you can import products, which, of course, like we saw in other segments of downstream, like in the fuel business, people started investing in just putting up all manner of facilities in the name of having a blending plant. And I speak from that because I think our own blending plant is one of the best because of the input by international partners working in conjunction with local understanding. So you found out that with a lot of that, there's an excess blending capacity in Nigeria now, and not all the facilities are world-class or the best, just for the intention of people to bring in base oil. And a lot of the oil you see on the streets by the roadside are just more or less base oil. But terms of the opportunities, we have a very dynamic population who are gradually understanding that if you want to protect an asset as important as a car or equipment that you invested millions into, you need to make sure you're giving it the right input. So the economy and the economics of it, though you pay more for quality lubricants, at the end you're actually saving money. And with the stronger brands, the international brands led that drive in the past, but a lot of local brands also have stepped up in their game and are giving quality lubricants into the market. And slowly, the demand for the roadside base oils and things are curbing and shifting more towards quality. So in a nutshell, what's happening in the industry is quality is being delivered into it. And it's, there's a joke we have in our office. Our CFO, anytime she wants cash flow, like she goes to the fuels department because they generate cash. But anytime she wants profit, she comes to lubricants because that's where the profitability in the business is. Because you can price the product as based on your inputs, and you can price it based on the quality you put into it and the value you think the customer can extract from it. So that's a nutshell on the lubricant business. But let me just digress very briefly into some of the other areas of the downstream, which no sense if you can't move it around. Even with the PMS, government absorbing the distribution costs, in other areas like lubricants, distribution cost is a significant play. And if in a deregulated environment, even with the Dangote refinery coming on board, the modular refineries will also have the benefits of proximity because the products will still have to be transported to the different locations. So that's a key place that look at a major opportunity in downstream, how to move the products produced around in the fast, efficient, and safe manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Nnamdi. Clearly, he has highlighted the opportunities with that sector, the lubricant business. And I want to challenge Michael. The downstream oil and gas sector is currently finding it difficult to access credit from the financial system. When Gabriel was speaking, he talked about a number of people have been issued license to build modular refineries. But right now, none of those refineries is actually being constructed, clearly because the economics is quite complex. To the extent that he did mention that even if all you just do is produce AGO. But the challenge you also have to contend with, which I want Michael to also dwell on, if you should have a modular refinery, you only produce AGO, and you get the product, the crude, your feedstock at commercial market rate of today, $77, $78, are you going to break even? And in case you don't break even, is the government going to fund that? But beyond that, the banking industry is finding it difficult to extend credit to that sector because there have been a lot of defaults. He did mention the issue that there may actually be overcapacity in terms of tank farm facilities. We're now building the LPG facilities very quickly, relating up capacity, and we may also get to a point where those that will be constructed with credit or leverage may not have a market, they will actually be oversupply. So what is the financial services industry, particularly the banking industry, of which he is worked with the Rayvme Finance Bank, doing to provide credit to the downstream oil and gas sector?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just start by saying that currently we are looking at some modular refinery in my bank, which we're going to finance. We are looking at that now. So we can see the landscape is changing now. I may not be able to talk more about other banks, but I'll be able to focus more on Bank of Industry now. Because you see, in the past, the focus has not been on the area where value is really being created. Once we help playing in that area, then the losses that we talk about really would not be that emphasized. The losses, the loss really in the past has been more from importation, and when there are fluctuation in price, it have a huge impact. But back of industry, we have all along we have been playing oil and gas industry, and we haven't recorded that. Yeah, there have been challenges, but no, that's quite difficult. We have actually been playing in the downstreams area, both in when you're talking about the gas, we have financed quite a lot of distribution projects, natural gas, CNG, compressed natural gas, and some other, even LPG facilities. And many of them have done tremendously well. Some of them in this place that we have really dealt with, and they have really done very well. So in terms of the economies, the business is good, the opportunities are there, and all these opportunities that have been highlighted by Yomi, Gabriel, and Nnamdi, it's there for us to finance as a bank of industry. The whole thing, that just like I said, is changing. The focus might now be on the real projects, the critical projects, in terms of distribution, in terms of plants, not on importation again. So in those areas, to some extent, they're a bit secured in terms of the supply and the off-taking side. And those will be the opportunities for us as a bank also to finance. Now we also be talking about the gas revolution, all the things that are coming. There'll be a lot of other projects coming in. And we are positioned, we are proactive anyway, and we are positioned to be able to finance quite a lot of projects in that regard. We're also talking about renewable energy. I know we're looking at that streams. Okay, we can also talk about that stream in that regard as well. And renewable energy also, in solar energy specifically, we have been able to prove that some things are possible. That's why that's why we decided to finance some solar energy project at that point in time. It's just a demonstration project that to prove to everybody that this thing can work, to prove to the investors that it can work, and to prove to the financials also that this is a template that you can make use of. Yes, there are challenges at that point in time. There were issues, but we have learned our lessons. We have proved to everybody that it can work, and we also build capacity in that regard where we are doing all those things. So the opportunities are there, and BOI is positioned there to finance those opportunities.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to be asking Yomi. While Michael was speaking, he made reference to renewable energy. I want Yomi to talk to us on the outlook of the fossil fuel industry in the next 20, 30 years. Today, a state like California has power generation from solar that amounts to about 20,000 megawatts. That's about 4 times what we produce in the country. If you go to England today, most of the taxis are running on dual fuel or dual energy source, battery, and liquid fuel. Then with the level of advancement in technology, we have seen wind-powered power generation, we have seen solar-powered power generation. We're seeing, initially in the past, they said there was no way to store power. But today, batteries are storing power, and batteries could store powers that could last a number of days. So where do you see the fossil fuel industry, and particularly the liquid fuel, in the next generation, in the next 30 years? What is your outlook? What are the downside risks and the upside potentials of fossil fuel?
Well, thank you, sir. I'm quite bullish about both. So the way that I see it is that the UK is first world, the US is first world, and whenever I visit, I see that the filling stations that I saw there last year are still there. So obviously, there's room for both. There's going to be a lot of progress made in the alternatives or the renewables fuel space, whether it's solar energy or wind energy in Nigeria, over the next 20, 30 years, I see that there's going to be a lot of investment. At the moment, the solutions aren't as cost effective as they should be. If you have inverters in your homes, you know the limitations therein, and you know that they're not cheap. And I expect that over the next 20, 30 years, these solutions will get cheaper. I also expect that fossil fuels will still exist. You know, we've got to disengage from believing that the fuels that we use, petrol, diesel, are the only outputs from crude oil. There are numerous other outputs. Now we've spoken about petrochemicals, resins, and all sorts of things. And so what I expect will happen is, in a first instance, the economy, industry will benefit from these renewable fuels as they come on board. There will be a substitution. So industries and businesses that are not as price savvy will latch on into the more expensive, renewable, environmentally friendly solutions, and the lower margin businesses will stay on the fuels, on the fossil fuels. There will be that displacement as the economy grows. We probably have another 15, 20 years of that, where we would all cohabit, and then sometime in the future, we will see an elimination of the fossil fuels cadre as we know it today. And so for the downstream business, 30-year horizon is a long horizon, 20-year horizon is a long horizon. And so a lot of investment will still go into fossil fuels as it goes into renewables. Solar is a very viable renewable, but it's very expensive. We are implementing solar solutions at some of our gas stations. We have 25. And those solutions at each of those gas stations cost us in excess of almost $50,000, $60,000 per site. And you can compare that to the additional refurbishment cost and all the other costs to get a site going. A generator is certainly a cheaper option. It's just not the right option. And so what I expect will happen is both categories of fuels will grow. The renewables and the alternatives will grow faster. They will attract more international financing and local financing. Fossil fuels will grow at a slower rate, but will still exist. And sometime in the future, we will see the switch. Those are my views.
Thank you, Yomi. At this stage, I think I'll open it to the audience. I believe a number of us have ideas on how to make the downstream sector more efficient, the direction of the downstream sector, and the opportunities that are there to be exploited, and maybe some ideas on innovative funding methods for the downstream sector.
Thank you. Questions? If we have any questions for our panel? Yeah, that will be one, that will be two, that will be three. I need a fourth. No, Prof, I'll take you last. I need a fourth. You will be the icing on the cake. Okay, two of you vote amongst yourselves. Decide who I should come to. Okay, I will talk to you in the kaftan. Don't mind me. All right. You have 1 minute. 1 minute.
Good afternoon. My name is Toib Aziz again. I just have a question.
Sound is on. Use it.
Sorry, my name is Toib Aziz, and this is my question. Over the session today, I think for distribution, people have been mentioning cylinders, and also I have the opportunity to know how or see how gas is distributed in other countries, and I can remember in some countries seeing cylinders, you see pipelines running into houses. So my question is distribution through cylinder and transport physically, is this the only option we have in Nigeria? Or can we already start looking forward into other ways of distributing gas, which probably would be safer and on the long run, more sustainable and cheaper than actually using cylinders? Thank you.
Good afternoon, dear panelists and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Akshay Saxena. I work with the Rain Oil Group.
My question goes to the representation of Eterna PLC, and it's on lubricants. I understand that there is an import of about 600 million liters of base oil in the country. This keeps on growing with the demand of lubricant. Base oil being the major constituent of any lubricant that we sell or blend in this country. I know in the Far eastern part of the country, there is something that's called renewable used base oil, where you filter used base oil to come up with virgin base oil. I don't know how much study has happened in Nigeria. I know that there was something that happened in the late 90s. Oil constitute environmental hazard and can be quite a potent hazardous material for all of us in the country. So what has happened? Will you please enlighten us if Eterna has any plans of doing filtration of used oil, or is there any such study that is happening? Because I think it will save us a lot of foreign exchange in the country, depleting in this way. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Ilori, CEO Cretimo. It's more like an observation and more or less a correction to Mr. Yomi. I don't know, while you were doing your presentation, you had a part where you said on the slide, you had a part where you said 10 modular refineries were given licenses. In actual fact, for the benefit of this discourse and for the purpose of the reason why we're here, it's actually 38. 38, and of those 38, 10 of them already have permit to construct. One already, that's in Delta State, already have the fabricated and assembled modular refinery brought, and it will begin operation, while the other one got the modular refinery in April. So if we continue to encourage, like the last plenary, the man we were referring to as government, if we continue to encourage them to give more licenses, even to my own fledgling company soon, we would be able to meet up with the demand to light up the nation. Thank you.
There was a fourth. That was you? You're positive?
Thank you very much. My name is Victor, and mine is also quite an observation, not necessarily a question, and it's in respect of what the last speaker spoke about when he talked about a viewpoint of what fossil fuel will be in the next 30 years. Personally, I feel that as a country, Nigeria, I've talked about demography, and I've seen that the population is not really on our side. So if we keep on focusing on fossil fuel by its nature, it's something that will go extinct at a point. Whether I would like it or not, it is fossil, meaning that it will get to a point where it will be extinct. Other countries, like we spoke of UK and US, but you see that these countries have actually taken steps to actually focus on a more proactive way of energy efficiency by way of renewable energy. These countries have signed into things like Brundtland Report, also Paris Agreement, and the use, okay, thank you, the use of ethanol, that is like sugarcane, fermented sugarcane, to actually drive flex vehicles. So I think there's really no time. Fossil fuel in 30 years will not be the same way we are using it now. So renewable energy will actually cater for this problem. This problem. Thank you. Also, the BP report, US company, that says that in 55 years, production would actually like diminish, because now people are actually drilling oil as far as the Arctic, which shows that there's really a problem. Thank you very much.
Okay, my moderator, please indulge me to take one more before I come to Mrs. Ezigbo. But this is grace I'm giving you, because when I ask for 4 questions and you don't raise your hand, I count my 4, I don't come back. I'm a professional, okay? That's my job.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Boyo from Bells University of Technology, Otta. Respect to the 7 principles of the opportunities of downstream. I understand downstream has to do with transportation and refining of the oil and everything. But my question is, how can the end users or consumers benefit directly from the 7 opportunities you actually mentioned? And I also noticed that federal government, before they were doing, you said something about Niger Delta security. So federal government, they were doing an amnesty program, but they stopped. But the end users, they actually benefit directly from that program. So the next question is, then what next for the oil and gas industry for the end consumers? Thank you very much.
And finally, from Mrs. Audrey Joe Ezigbo. Before I come back to you, Mr. Moderator.
Good afternoon. My name is Audrey Joe Ezigbo, co-founder of Falcon Corporation. I'm also the first vice president of the Nigerian Gas Association. 2 things. First, a comment, and both my comment and question are directed to you, Gabriel. First of all, you were listing some of the tank farm projects coming up in the LPG space, but you forgot to mention Falcon. So allow me to correct you that Falcon is building a 12,000 metric ton facility in Port Harcourt. We're starting with the first 4,000 metric tons, and we'll scale up over the next 3 to 5 years. That's the first thing. Now, my question to you, and it's really more of getting your thoughts and insights as to how this is going to play out. In the face of the situation where currently, as we all know, government is the one that is primarily bringing in products into the country, and in the face of Dangote now being the one positioning to become a major supplier on the domestic front, much as we're talking about other people investing in modular refineries, from a cost-benefit point of view, does that make sense? Will the economics pan out? Will we not find ourselves in a situation where, and this is no, I'm not making a run on Dangote, fabulous investor, doing great things in the country, but are we not positioning ourselves for a situation where Dangote's refinery simply makes a shift to the government's supply source, and we find ourselves back in a position that might not be competitive and sustainable in the long term? You cannot compare the economics of modular refining to that of a standard refinery. What are your thoughts in this regard, vis-a-vis how the industry should be evolving? Thank you.
And that's a wrap from the Q&A.
Thank you. Mine is to play the moderator role. So I'm not challenged to answer the question. But I just make a few comments on the question, the first question on the distribution of gas through the cylinders. Is that the most efficient method we can distribute gas in Nigeria? The key thing is that economic models are built around the environment where they have to be implemented. The challenge you have today, in other countries, like we rightly pointed out, you have gas piped into individual homes and metered, so that consumers can actually just open their gas valve, cook their food. In fact, in US today, most homes are not running on gas, they are running on electricity. Most cooking energy source in US homes are now on electricity, not on gas. So the challenge you have in the country today is that we do not have the social structure that can support piping of gas to homes. The cost is quite huge, and then you have to deal with the issue of bridging of those facilities and implications of such bridge. Today, we talk about trucking of petroleum products around the country. In other countries, those things, in fact, in this country, in the 70s, petroleum products was piped around the country. But today, we can't do that. And I always say this, look, until we reduce the level of poverty in this country, you cannot really pump petroleum products through the pipelines around the country. Simple is, a person who has not eaten throughout the day will take the risk of his life to break that pipe and get 50 liters of fuel, and you can't stop it around the country. So that's why we are still dealing with the issue of trucking. So some of the challenges we have are because of our level of social economic development and the structure of our society. But I'll hand over the mic to those whose job today is to answer the questions. So Gabriel, a lot of questions have been thrown at you. I think let's start with Audrey's question. One, we must acknowledge that they have a 12,000 capacity LPG facility. They will be commissioned very soon. And then I think you can take all the questions without further summary of it.
Thank you very much. Let me start by congratulating Dr. and Mrs. Ezigbo for the project Falcon is currently doing in Port Harcourt. I'm happy to have that information. I think you also need to put it in the public space because there's a lot of investment going on the LPG space right now. Now, Dangote refinery is definitely going to be some sort of game changer. Nigeria, we need it. A country, 190 million people, practically importing about 90% of our fuel requirements is not sustainable. So on that score, we need the Dangote refinery. On the other note, we run a regulated industry where government fixes the price of petrol. Today, the landed cost of petrol today is about 185 naira per liter, with crude inching towards $80 a barrel. Meanwhile, government says we should sell at 145. Today, government is easily subsidizing petrol with 50 naira per liter. So if you're burning 40 million liters of fuel every day, you can imagine, I think easily we are spending about 2 billion naira daily today subsidizing petrol. That is not sustainable. Now, if Dangote refinery were to start operation today, then it's either government deregulates, because Dangote is not going to buy crude, refine the fuel, and sell it at 145. It's not going to happen. So something will have to give. It's our belief that before the refinery starts operation, government will have to deal with the policy issues on pricing. However, Dangote has what, from my point of view, is a disadvantage. And that disadvantage is the disadvantage of double handling. They are building the refinery at the Lekki Free Trade Zone. There's no crude oil being produced at the Lekki Free Trade Zone. So they are going to either pipe the crude, or from what they are doing now with the SBM they are building, they are going to ship the crude from wherever to Lekki Free Trade Zone. That's going to be some costs. They are going to refine the fuel and they are going to ship it out again. Now, compare that with a typical modular refinery. A modular refinery is best sited at the wellhead. So the cost of moving the crude is zero. You get the crude out of the ground, you refine it, and then you are only evacuating the refined petroleum product from the wellhead location. It may be small, so it will come with its own advantage. But one thing I know is that in life, the only thing that is constant is change. I'm privileged to have been in this industry for the past 26 years. For the past 26 years, all I've done is sell petroleum products. I started selling fuel in this country where fuel was 70 kobo per liter. Diesel was 60 kobo per liter. A whole tanker load of diesel in 1992, when I came into this industry, was 18,000 naira. One thing I know is that the way this industry ran in 1992 was not the way it ran in year 2000, was not the way it ran in year 2010, it's not the way it's running today in 2018, and it's not the way it's going to run by 2030. One thing I know is that the industry will survive. The only thing that will happen is that the strategy for surviving the industry will keep changing. What I have seen is that in 2018, people are complaining that the market is tough because they are trying to apply a solution that worked in 2011 to a 2018 challenge. It's not going to happen. The market has changed. The market has changed. It is what it is. So it's our responsibility to keep coming up with strategies to deal with things as they are. So, Mrs. Ezigbo, I give you one assurance. The modular refining people will survive. Dangote refinery will survive. It's going to be some game changing. The need for the tank farms will gradually reduce and pan out. I mean, I was on the waterways a few days ago. I was on a boat and I was passing through Ibafor, but from the water, and I looked at the whole Ibafor. Not one ship was at berth. Not one. That's the same Ibafor before, that when you bring your ship could wait outside for more than 1 week waiting for bed space. Today, you load a ship, you're coming into Ibafor, you're going to berth. So the market is changing. So that is why a couple of years ago, there was no when there was no nav gas. Where nav gas is today, it used to be needle gas. There was no nav gas. NIPCO didn't have an LPG facility. But just look at what has happened in the last 5 years, how much investment has come into the LPG space. NavGas have built initially 8,000. Now they've added an additional sphere. Falcon is investing in that space. I mean, so many other people have invested in that space, and more investments will come. So what will happen is that the areas where the smart money will go will keep changing, but the industry will remain. That's my perspective.
Thank you, Gabriel. Now, the next question was actually related at you. We talked about that currently there's importation about 600 million liters of base oil into the country. And then what are the risks that are posed by the renewable or the hazards of renewable base oil? And talk us through those and the opportunities in that area.
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. The figure you quoted about 600 million liters is actually, I'm not sure all of that is used in Nigeria, but it's about the right figure, what we've been hearing. And it is a concern. Over the past several years, I don't think anybody can categorically tell you, after those things have been used in equipment or machinery, what happens to that oil. It's a place where I think, in terms of regulation, the government has significantly failed the country, because a lot of the players cannot account for all the products they've sold, what eventually ultimately happens to that used oil. And most likely is going into the soil somewhere. And globally, there's been a push for what you mentioned in terms of filtering or reconditioning base oils or used oil to become reusable. And last year, when Etana was having the program with Castro and a lot of their big players came in, it was actually a topic that came up, because there's a study they've been doing, and particularly successful in India, where they're recertifying their own products to use reconditioned oils. So first of all, the players have to make sure the oil is suitable to meet the quality standards they want. So there's a lot of international push for that. In Nigeria, there's been relatively very little. And ultimately, base oil as a market, even with the refineries coming in, refining Nigerian crude might not necessarily give you all the classes of base oil you need. So you probably still have to import some, but the trade-off is you also be able to sell some of the ones that are produced in Nigeria, which typically with the lighter grades. But that said, so there's not much buzz in the industry about reconditioned base oil, but it's a very significant thing, because the how you dispose, because all the environmental concerns coming now, the how you dispose of oil once you use it is becoming more and more important. And it's an area that hasn't been looked at. For fuel, it'll burn, it'll turn into gas, it'll enter the atmosphere. But for the oils, you still have the physical thing to do it. The most acceptable standards now is to incinerate it or dope it in LPFO, so it's actually now burnt off. But those have not been looked at in a sustainable or in a scale comparable to what is being pushed out there. It's an area that should be looked at, and investments will probably go in there in terms of in the future if the opportunity and the economics represents itself. But the bottom line is, even globally, it's a global issue, and it's not cheap to do. So to answer your question directly, in Nigeria, there has been very little. And globally, there's been a lot of efforts, but relatively still small results. So it's something that if Nigeria gets into, it has an opportunity to jump in at the level where the rest of the world is and actually address it as a problem.
Okay, thank you, Nnamdi. The comments from Michael and Victor, I don't think they require response. They are basically contributions to enrich the discussion and collate some aspects of presentation. The final question actually goes to Yomi, and the question is, how would a common man like me benefit from the opportunity, saving opportunity you mentioned in your presentation? I think a lady called Boyo asked that question.
Okay, thank you. I think the best way to answer that is that we've got to see the industry as one that still has a lot to offer consumers. And unfortunately, we're still talking elementary value. So let's be more specific. I'm looking forward to an industry where the days of supply shortages are in the past. So very quickly, in the last few years, if you've been in this country, it's as though the supply shortages are timed. They all seem to come at a certain time of the year, and they're all very painful. And you would be, you could ask anybody on the streets, nobody could tell you exactly why there's a fuel shortage or why there are queues, and we all suffer for months without end, and we participate in different information mismanaged schemes that suggest that there's actually fuel and somebody is hoarding it as though we are not educated people. So the first thing is, as industry settles down and the policies and some of the things that I discussed kick in, hopefully the days of supply shortages come to an end. Secondly, consumers then start to enjoy better service. I would have asked here, if we had more time, for anybody who bought fuel or has bought fuel from any station in Nigeria in the last 1 week and has been told thank you, that you remember how you were told thank you, to stand or raise their hand. And the reason is because it is not a buyer's market. What happens is that my full tank is 13,000 naira. There's nothing that I buy for 13,000 naira every week and I don't get a decent thank you for. Nothing. And that's what happens today. I literally drive into the station, and I'm a practitioner, and I'm appalled at the way I'm treated, and I drive out, and I have no choice. And the next week, I go and do the same thing. I don't get a receipt. I don't... have a better experience. For the 4 minutes you're there, it had better be a damn good organizations that want to add additional value. The stations are lovely experiences every time you go. And just, connecting to the gas comment about cylinders, I remember there was a country I went to and I was shocked to find out that they didn't even pipe gas into the homes for cooking or heating. Electricity was used for cooking and heating. Gas was piped to a local government within 10 kilometers, and that local government provided heating and cooling, and it was all provided for by the oil and gas companies. So the same company initially that was selling you diesel to power your generator is now big enough and sophisticated enough to sell gas to a local government or a local player who, at an aggregate basis, now sells cooling actually sells cool air to your house in the summer and hot air to your house in the winter. The same BP, the same Chevron, the same Shell. We're not even there yet. And we can go further. That company also invests in helping estates collect water, rainwater, okay, and uses steam for heating. Okay? And these are value propositions that are possible today in the market being given by oil and gas companies right across the world. So, I think the direct answer to this question is, there are numerous things that consumers will benefit from as the industry settles, as policy becomes more consistent, as investment goes into the sector, as skill, scale, and opportunity opens up. None of those things are currently available in this market.
Thank you, Yomi. I think we must from this session. We've seen a lot of opportunities in the downstream sector, cutting across retail outlets, bridging opportunities, that is ownership of the transportation facilities, trucks, opportunity in the LPG market, which is now being exploited massively. The opportunity in the modular refinery, I have my doubts about that. Then we deal with the issue of challenges, where we've looked at the opportunity as well in the lubricant market. But in summary, the energy sector, which the oil and gas sector is a component of it, will continue to change. But ultimately, the world will continue to rely on energy to exist. Whether you are a human being, which we also live on energy, because if you don't eat, you won't have the energy to come here and sit through here. And it's time for us to go and eat. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much. Just hold on, gentlemen. Just hold on. Just remain in your seat for another 3-4 minutes. We'll be done. Just give us 3-4 minutes. Okay? Very quickly, without wasting too much of your time. But before I do that, every time I MC or moderate events of this nature, we're talking gas power, all I say to the distinguished delegates like yourselves is, are you paying for the power you are using? If you're not, you're part of the problem. If you are a solution. Keep being a solution. So I'm not asking you to answer. For me, it's just a food for thought. For the closing remarks, and this time I would really want us to give her an applause befitting of a woman who is not just paying lip service. Interestingly, my company is called Lip Service. So when I hear lip service, it makes me go, okay, there goes my brand, right? Now, she's not just paying lip service to the issues in the country. She stands up, identifies an issue, and gathers her clout to address that issue, profile solution, and in the end, try to get it to the quarters of those who would hear and do something about it. So in that regard, I think we should give her an applause befitting of such dedication, tenacity, and patriotism. Please welcome Chizor Malize, convener of this event and the lead consultant at BrandZone. We welcome her for the closing remarks. Once she's done that, I will come back and announce launch proceedings. Let's keep the applause coming, please, until she meets me here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be back again upstage saying good morning and good afternoon. I'm extremely delighted to see today happen. And the greatest part of it is we've had to put together something which to some may seem is easy to do, but quite assiduous. But then that's also happening because there are so many people who on their personal capacity, in their personal capacity and in their corporate capacity, committed to seeing today happen. All of the individuals we've seen today come up stage, took so much time to prepare, because there's so much of learning that has happened today, I have no doubt about that. But to bring their time and commit their time to bring in knowledge of what they do, the experts that they are, the technocrats that they are, bringing it to bear across diverse age group is extremely commendable. So while we thank the ones that have gone, I would like us to very, very loudly put our hands together for the ones that are still on stage and available to us. They represent the best of the oil and gas sector, and I'm sure that every single person who is here today has seen the entire value chain of energy and key and critical people who represent that value chain today. The interaction is no doubt in any way, super. We thank them. I'd also like to thank our conference advisory board members, a good number of people who put their heads together, put thoughts together. We worried them like stiff. And because they are extremely knowledgeable in the things of the industry, they helped so well to form this conference. But in the choice of topic and themes and content, they did extremely well. A number of them are up here on the stage, like Mr. Gabriel Ogbechie. We thank you, Mr. Ogbechie. We also thank you, Yomi, in your capacity now as a conference advisory board member. We also thank you, Mr. Chukwu. And we thank you, Mrs. Audrey Joy Ezigbo. Could you please take a bow, ma'am? Thank you so much. So you see how all of these experts, besides committing time to share knowledge, also helped to mold this conference from the background. We also have very, very young and devoted people who work with me and worked with me on the conference. I would like to invite up to the stage our conference committee members, as well as the volunteers on ground today. Please, can you just come up stage? Please put your hands together for them as they come up. A lot of these things take so much to put together. Yes. It's plenty of tireless work, sleepless night, conceiving. Yes, please. Yes, thank you very much. Plenty of sleepless night, tireless work, conceiving this, bringing it to life today. And every single one of us agreed that we are extremely very proud of what we've produced and put together for the energy sector today. So take a bow, young people. Thank you. We'd also like to thank our sponsors and partners who made this happen. Some in cash, some in kind, some in direction, some in providing facilities, some in just being who they are, being with us on this journey because they love what we do. This is the 5th year of curating the Brand Innovation Conference. And I'll tell you what, the energy sector conference, I think, is the most exciting in the sense that it brought huge volume of knowledge across an entire value chain. And I think that when we do this again, we extremely are certain that we would see all of you again. So put your hands together for yourself for listening and being a part of today. Yes. On behalf of all of us, myself and everybody out here, I must thank God for making today possible. Against all odds, whether it's the rain and the people who were not able to make it. And please, I would love to say we should all put a great hand of applause for 2 great people today. One is the conference chairperson, Mr. Tonye Cole, who is unavoidably absent today for great reasons that are hugely understandable. As we put our hands together for him, not just because from day one, he supported the vision of this conference, took us on the journey, went on the journey with us, both in terms of planning, conceptualization, and content. But most importantly, even being able to monitor progress as we are in this room today. Please put your hands together for him. And even in absentia, the former Minister of Petroleum Resources, who opened today's conference and sat in as chairman on behalf of Mr. Tonye Cole. I think he did a wonderful job of that deliberation, and his knowledge also brought to bear, and good opening, good remarks, and fantastic opportunity that we had of him. At this juncture, as I say thank you to every one of us, I would say we would see again on several other programs and platforms. We do a lot of conferences, and like we know, BrandZone is the leading globally inspired brand consulting firm that works from out of Nigeria. We not only manage local brands, we manage international ones, but most interestingly, we build global ones that are positioned to take over the world. And on this note, I would say, thank you for being here today. Thank you for being a part of this. And we'll see you again at other times.
Please rise for a group photograph, and she joins you now. Very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and there you have it. My name is Richmond Osuji. It's been my pleasure serving you. Lunch is served as it was in the same hall as we did tea and coffee. But please, again, Sharon and Grace, I guess, will tell you what tables have been reserved for our speakers and some of our advisory board members and some of our distinguished invited guests. Please indulge them as they tell you that table that is reserved, and they will also point you to the other tables where you can sit. For now, bon appetit, as they say in France. I'll see you some other time, and Godspeed as you return back to your offices and different destinations. Richmond Osuji says, a bientôt. Bye-bye.